My name is Kevin Walsh, KK6FRK. I'm in San Diego, California. This presentation is going to be about what is the Scout Jamboree on the Air, but I'm going to preface this with some history of radio scouting and scouts that have been involved in radio over time. From the very beginning of scouting, radio has been part of scouting. So with any scouting activity, we always have to start out with the opening ceremony, okay?
Yes, sir. Forward. Hold. Close. Translate. Play.
Right. Hopefully, there we go. All right, so this is the objectives of the presentation. We're going to test your radio knowledge the Scout way, so most of you all are probably general or advanced. We're going to cover some fun facts of history of scouting and radio. I'm going to give you an overview of radio scouting, an introduction to the radio merit badge, which has been part of the scouting program since 1923, an overview of Jamboree on the Air, okay, and how you and your organization can help with Jamboree on the Air. All right, so first we're going to start with a test. So Boy Scouts, as I told you, they've been involved in radio since the very beginning of scouting. This is from the handbook, the 1911 edition of the handbook. So I want you guys to look at this diagram, and I want you to look at what you think you're going to need to put this together. This is in the handbook, Boy Scout handbook in 1911. So see if you can find out where your variable condenser is. You're going to have 5 to 10 plates of a variable condenser that you would have to put together if you were a scout back in 1911. You're going to have a 2-inch induction coil, a heavy spark gap. Back then, they preferred, zinc. 1 wireless key with heavy contacts. Okay, so I'm going to come. This is part of your test. So at the very end, you're going to get tested on this. We're not done yet. This was the requirement for the first class rank. Okay, you had to build your own receiver and transmitter. Again, this was back in 1911. Okay, and this was for your first class rank. Now the upper, you're gonna find this a little amusing. What do you people think the illustration is that is labeled aerial up in the top of this drawing?
A hammock.
That's right. They called it an aerial back then. And in the Boy Scout handbook in 1911, they recommended that your aerial be at least 100 feet long, and that it be 40 to 60 feet off of the ground. Now, they did not have HOAs back then, but this was an actual requirement back in 1911. And you could, this is pre-Amazon Prime, obviously, but they had the parts list and the price that you could order every part that you needed mail order for less than $4.50 in 1911. That was a lot of money in 1911. Okay. All right. Now, this was a second class requirement in 1941. This is in the Boy Scout handbook. So take a look at this and imagine if you had to do this today before you could pass your technician exam. Okay, and see the text about where there's no phones or telegraph when you're out in the woods camping out. Again, this is 1941. And so this was it was a requirement for some of you older scouters, like when I became a scout in 1963, it was a requirement to do 5 words of Morse code for the second class requirement until the early 70s. I can't remember exactly when they dropped the requirement, but you had to either do Morse code or Indian Sign Language, or the ASL, American Sign Language, until the early 70s. Okay. And this is your first class requirement. So do you all think that you could do this today? Some of you that passed your exam when Morse was still required. I can't remember when they dropped the Morse code requirement. I think it was in the 80s or early 90s. So this was as a scout. So you'll find out that a lot of old timers that are accomplished amateur radio operators that know CW, they were introduced to CW when they were a Boy Scout. There's a scouter, a guy that is here in San Diego that Glenn, I can't remember Glenn's last name or call sign, but he was on summer camp staff in 1959 at Camp Balboa, where we had our Jamboree on the Air this past year. And so he had to learn this just so that he could advance to first class. All right, and this is in your handbook. So the handbook is considered part of the Scout uniform to this day. And when you've signed in the back of your handbook, Scouts would have to have individual requirements signed off as they advanced. And again, this was one of the requirements. You either had to do Morse or semaphores or American Sign Language. So this is right out of the 1941 edition of the Boy Scout Handbook. All right. So now you're not done. You also had to build a radio. This was a requirement in the 1947 edition of the Radio Merit Badge. This is if you were going to earn the Radio Merit Badge in 1947. So if you had those symbols of the individual components that you had to acquire that are on the left, and then the parts list is on the right. And in the back of the Radio Merit Badge pamphlet in the late 1940s, it was mail order. You would order all of these parts from an outfit in New Jersey. I think it was near Cherry Hill. And you could get all of these parts mail order for less than $4.50. Again, I think that was about it. And $4.50 was still a hunk of money in 1947. Okay. And this is what you would build. So that is the diagram. This is right out of the handbook. So you had to take those components that you got from the outfit in New Jersey and build in, see that little project box and the knobs and everything. And you had to build that if you were going to earn the Radio Merit Badge in the late 1940s. Okay. All right, so this is an overview of radio scouting. So as I said, the radio scouts and radio have been in It's been a part of scouting since 1911, but the first merit badge was actually the wireless merit badge in 1918. Then the first radio merit badge was created in 1923. And then we had a variety of radio versions of the radio merit badge pamphlet over the years. I don't know if people that are scouters back in the day remember getting Boys Life back in the day. I remember getting it in the 1960s. And then K2BSA received their national license designation in 1971. Again, I think 72 was the year, 72, 73 was when they dropped the Morse code requirement. So there's been a range of radio merit badge requirements that have changed over the years. I'm going to show you a kind of an eye chart of the current radio merit badge requirements. You no longer have to do Morse code. Then the Morse code interpreter strip was created, I think, by radio scouting K2BSA folks. It is the language strip. So people can look at my uniform and see that I have the interpreter strip. If you know a foreign language, Morse code is considered by scouts to be like a foreign language. So if you have Spanish or whatever it might be, Spanish, French, German, Russian, you can get a language interpreter strip. And now scouts that earn their license, they are eligible to have a amateur radio operator strip on their uniform. And then for those of you that are scout leaders, see that 2015, there's a knot that you can get to be on your uniform if you help organize something like a Jamboree on the Air or any kind of radio scouting activity. You are eligible to get a knot. Most of you adult leaders know that there's a variety of knots that you can get, that some of them are very significant for service to your council or your district. Okay. This is the current requirements of the radio merit badge. I know it is an eye chart. We do that. I will say that scouts that do earn the radio merit badge, I probably am involved easily 3, 4, 5 times a year facilitating the radio merit badge. We do it at field day. As for those of you who weren't on the Zoom session a little bit earlier, we partner with the University of California, San Diego student IEEE chapter right at the beginning of the spring academic quarter, which this year is going to be the first week of April. We're doing the radio merit badge and the electronics merit badge and the programming merit badge. I think those 3 merit badges go together, especially as software-defined radio continues to be an emerging area for amateur radio enthusiasts. But what you can see is they've got these various requirements. Requirement 9 alpha is where you can choose amateur radio. You can do broadcast radio as well, but the scout has to define what radio is. They have to do a diagram that shows how radio waves travel locally and around the world. They have to do, for example, they have to illustrate the skip zone. A lot of this is in the technician exam. They have to explain the difference between DX and a local station. They have to discuss they have to learn what the rule of the FCC is. Okay. The requirement that most scouts are challenged by is requirement number 3, which is where they have to draw a chart of the electromagnetic spectrum. They have to label services that go within, that are assigned to particular ranges. They have to identify 8 radio services. So some scouts need some assistance in Elmering here. The K2BSA YouTube videos are excellent. We leverage those a great deal. And then they have to learn and explain how radio waves carry information. They have to do a block diagram and a schematic diagram. So for example, when we are doing the radio merit badge on the USS Midway in about 3 weeks on the 18th, the scouts are going to have to draw a block diagram, the full equipment string between the transceivers, which are Elecraft K3s down in the radio room. Then they're going to go above decks. For those of you who have not been on the USS Midway, it's CV-41. It is now a museum in San Diego. Has a lot of vintage aircraft that are up on the flight deck. So the scouts are going to have to draw their block diagram, but they're going to have to trace the equipment string, the coax, up above decks, topside, to where the antennas are. See how the coax mates with, it's the feed line that mates with the antennas that are custom to the USS Midway. Okay. Then the other, like anything else, they have to discuss, learn about safety. The K3s are operating at 100 watts on the USS Midway. Safety is, again, a requirement. Then one of the ways that we satisfy requirement number 7 on the USS Midway, as well as at UCSD, the University of California, San Diego, they have to visit a radio installation. So when they come above on the Midway, or they come to UCSD, we have a radio set up that's ready for them to visit. And then we explain everything that is inside the radio room on the Midway, or everything that is in the mobile radio operation setup that we use at UC San Diego, UCSD. And of course, there's career opportunities. There's a lot of career opportunities that we have here in San Diego. It's a big Navy town. So we have, when we have the Midway, the number of retired military that are part of the radio merit badge team on the Midway. And they talk about their careers from when they were in the Navy. And then we have a couple of active duty Seabees, that's the construction battalion within the Navy. And what the Navy construction battalion does is they go in advance and set up basic infrastructure, and they set up comms. So they show how they set up everything except for their encryption devices with an NVIS antenna here in San Diego when they do operations on the beach across where the Coronado is, which is a big, it's kind of a big Navy presence over in Coronado. And then they have to do requirement number 9 alpha, where they have to learn about the various license, technician, general, extra. They have to talk on the radio for at least 10 minutes or make 5 QSOs. So what we do on the USS Midway is we have the scouts go above decks. So we divide the scouts into patrols or groups. And the scouts go to the airplanes that are up on the flight deck. They go to 5 airplanes, and each scout has to call net control, and net control asks the scouts to describe particular aspects of the plane that they happen to be stopping at on the flight deck. It could be an old helo from the Vietnam era. So they had this conversation back and forth. So that way the scouts carry out the QSO in order to meet the requirement, but they also learn about the planes on the USS Midway. Okay, so this is the current requirements. One of the other ways to satisfy the requirement for the radio merit badge is to do a T hunt a transmitter hunt. Okay. All right, here's your pop quiz. This is requirement number 3. So imagine you're a scout and you're like 13 or 14 years old. And we did this an exercise at the Palomar Amateur Radio Club a few years back, where we literally handed out the requirements. We divided the members that were attending the meeting that evening, and we divided them into patrols. In other words, like 5 or 6 members of the Palomar Amateur Radio Club, and we had them fill out the merit badge worksheet as if they were a scout earning the merit badge. And even licensed operators struggled with this particular requirement, but they had a lot of fun. After the meeting was over, several of the people that were at the meeting said, this is the most fun that we've had at a meeting in a long time, because we're not just sitting there listening to somebody give a presentation like you guys are listening to me right now. We actually had to get together and think and remember what the electromagnetic spectrum was and where services are and how they're assigned. Okay. All right. So here's now I'm going to go a little bit more into the radio merit badge. This is at UCSD. This is University of California, San Diego. This is the group of scouts that we had. I think this is last year, because you see them some of them are wearing the COVID masks. And the building in the background is the Central University Library, now called the Geisel Library, because Ted Geisel of Dr. Zeus fame donated a significant amount of money. And so the library is now named after him, and in the special collections department at the university. Many of his notebooks and drafts of the various works, that from the Cat in the Hat to the full range of books and other pieces that Ted Geisel did over his career. So you can see in this particular photograph, there are young women and there are young men. So Boy Scouts is now Boy Scouts of America is still the parent organization, but they now call it Scouting, just without the boy. But there are boy troops and then there are girl troops. I will say from my experience of serving on staff at summer camps, the girls are they are a little bit ahead in terms of maturity than their boy counterparts. They work better together as teams. And at summer camp, when troops compete with one another, the girl troops, I hate to say it, did better than their boy counterparts, and with few exceptions. Okay. So at UCSD, the way we do it, we focus on the requirements. And so for those of you that are on the Zoom call and you're thinking about how to do the radio merit badge, either in your club or to get involved locally with a scout troop or a scout district or zone, is what we do is that we use the K2BSA YouTube videos that were created. Some of you are already familiar with radio scouting and K2BSA. I was on the radio team at the National Jamboree in 2017, and we used the YouTube videos. We leveraged those. But what it does is when you're dealing with scout age youth that can begin at 11 years old and up to the time, they're right before they turn 18, they can do the academic requirements by using these YouTube videos. And during COVID, the scouts, all youth, got used to doing Zoom. So what we do is we have the scouts across the age ranges do the videos and fill out their worksheets in advance. And then when they come to the university, we focus on getting them on the air. We focus on getting them to visit a station and do their block diagram of the equipment string, of the transceivers, the batteries, the feed line, the antennas. So they can independently do the academic part fill out their worksheets, and then when they arrive at UCSD, it's UCSD students that are doing the instruction, UCSD students that are going over their worksheets, UCSD students that are doing the Elmering. So the scouts come and they are working with young UCSD students that are a few years older than them. And many of the scouts, that's what they want to do. They want to be exactly like those kids that are the students at UCSD someday. Many of the scouts that I work with, going to college is what they want to do, and it's definitely what their parents want to do. And when their parents come, they get a tour of the university. We actually, the way we do things at UC San Diego is that the scouts go to these this outdoor art collection called the Stewart Collection. So like on the USS Midway, the scouts go to planes and describe the airplanes to net control. At UCSD, the scouts go to an outdoor art collection that is distributed throughout the campus. When they get to a piece of art like the Sun God, then they call net control, and net control asks them to describe the piece of art that they are next to. We get some very interesting interpretations of art from these scout age youth. All right, so now I'm going to hit Jamboree on the Air. So Jamboree on the Air has been an annual event. It started in 1956. It's the single largest scouting event that we have it's been every year. The numbers I got from K2BSA, it's essentially like field day for Boy Scouts. It starts on a Friday afternoon and it runs through Sunday morning. Very similar to field day. And so what we do is we make it a council event in the San Diego Imperial Council, so that our council includes San Diego County and Imperial County. For those of you that are not familiar with Southern California, we are a border county. Imperial County is the county immediately to the east of us, which is a major agricultural area. All of your winter lettuce and vegetables, the majority of them are grown in Imperial Valley, and it's on the Mexican border. San Diego is also on the Mexican border. Tijuana in Mexico is actually a larger city than San Diego. So we introduced the scouts to amateur radio. It's hands-on. They get to talk on the radio. We do a transmitter hunt. We have some literature from the ARRL that we hand out. And when their parents are there, we tell them about scholarships. When you tell parents that if their scout age youth get good at radio and apply for scholarships, then that piques up the attention of the parents. And there's several scouts that I work with that have applied for the ARR scholarships, and they've been awarded scholarships. Some of the scholarships, for those that you don't know, are rather small, like a couple of $1,000s. Some of them are significantly more, like $25,000. But you've got to be serious and commit to it and get good at it. The president of KK6 UC at University of California, San Diego, Owen Cruz, he won 2 scholarships. He graduated, and now he's working as an engineer at Northrop Grumman. All right, so when you do Jamboree on the Air, you don't necessarily have to go to a scout camp or an outdoor. You can do it from home, because you have to keep in mind that scouting units all over the United States, and now with Jamboree on the internet, it's international. When we had the Jamboree on the Air last year, we made a lot of contacts in North America, but there was a band opening and we made contact with South America and Australia for a short period of time. We were talking from San Diego to scouts in Australia, and our scouts were super excited. So this is an outdoor version of Jamboree On The Air. The picture on the left is of transmitter hunting. So it's all scout age youth, by the way, not just Boy Scouts. So the picture on the left, there's a lot of scouts that are Cub Scouts. They were camping out at Camp Boa. So we had about 200 scouts that were camping out over the weekend. Okay. The picture in the upper right-hand corner is a girl troop from Point Loma, California, which is an area of San Diego, right on the ocean. So these young women were talking. I think that we were raising somebody in Vancouver, British Columbia, and they were super excited. And the scout leader of this girl troop has their license. In the lower right-hand corner, that photo is of a Starlink antenna that we were using for internet access. And that was a 20-meter crank up. So if you're amateur radio club, or if you choose to support a scouting unit or a scouting council, I don't have to tell you this, just like field day, antenna makes all the difference in the world. So that little crank up antenna, even though it's what we had, but it made a great deal of difference. So we were making contacts all over the United States, definitely favoring the left coast from California up to Washington State and British Columbia. Okay. All right. So these are the benefits. It's pretty self-explanatory. The scouts, they don't know, they are walking around with a smartphone, which is a handheld software-defined radio. And I explained to them that it's a handheld software-defined radio. It's by historical standards, it's a portable supercomputer, and they just have to pay to use the frequencies that their carrier has to pay the FCC. And I explained to them how with amateur radio, the FCC has allotted frequencies for amateur use. It's not that we're amateurs in terms of what we know. It's we cannot use the frequencies assigned to us by the FCC to make money. And they get that. They get, because we were able to talk with scouts in British Columbia and in Australia. And it was really funny because the scouts in Australia had, a typical Australian accent. So the scouts in the United States in San Diego thought that was really cool. There's another, for those of you that are not scouters, there's a number of merit badges, and many are Eagle required. So citizenship in the world is an Eagle required merit badge. And because we were making radio contact with scouting units outside of the United States, it helped the scouts satisfy requirement 9 Bravo to take part in an international event. Okay. So in the past, we have done the radio and programming and electronics all together over the course of the weekend. And one of the projects that we did for the electronics merit badge was this kit that we got called the Amazing Electronic Neckerchief Slide. I should have gotten mine. It's basically a kit that scouts put together, and it has a mini Arduino on it, and then it has a little LED display that spells out in Morse code, "Be prepared." All right, so this is one of the requirements. I don't have to explain this to you, but this is the basic. This is a basic goal when we have Jamboree on the Air. We explain what amateur radio is to the scouts and their parents. And that, again, it starts at Cub Scout age. So we get 6-year-old scouts, boys and girls, all the way up to 17 and 18. All right, so on radio scouting, it's essentially a kind of programmatic approach to integrate radio and radio technology into scouting as a whole. So it's not just the radio merit badge, as I've already shown. You got the rating strip, Morse code interpreter strip, Jamboree on the Air, K2BSA at the national jamborees and at the World Jamboree. Later this year, there's a Scouting World Jamboree in South Korea. And they will set up, for those of you that did not, if you haven't heard about Jamboree on the Air or the World Jamboree, at the National Jamboree in 2017, there was a team of about 35 adult scouters that are ham radio operators that set up operations at the Summit Scout Ranch. There were about 40,000 scouts there. We had about 1,000 scouts a day that visited operations. ICOM is the, how should I say, the official sponsor of radios for scouting. We had almost the complete catalog of ICOM gear for that amateur radio class radio gear. Whatever ICOM did not provide, DX Engineering gave us everything we needed, as well as MFJ. My hat's off to DX Engineering. We had and we were operating on all bands, and we had a really slick 2 satellite setups. We made contact with the space station. It was really rocking. But back to DX Engineering, we had an element failure on one of the antennas, and DX Engineering hand carried it to us from their headquarters to the Scout Ranch in West Virginia. All right, so this is a link that everybody has access to to this presentation. This is a link to a video where scouts are talking about what they think about Jamboree on the Air. Okay, so how do you organize a JOTO event? No matter where you live, there is a district or council and a camporee that usually is associated with Jamboree on the Air. If they don't have an organized Jamboree on the Air event, contact your local council. Just one way to find out where your local council is, just Google it or go to beascout.org, put in your zip code, and that tells you the closest Boy Scout unit and council to your zip code. I highly recommend having this be like a ham radio club effort where they organize, and it does take a good deal of time to organize this and do it the Scout way. We will do an article for Scouting 360 and Scouting Magazine on what we're doing on the Midway. We put together a lot of programmatics. Each one of the Radio Merit Badge volunteers on the USS Midway did a 1-minute video about their experience in ham radio. All of us are Navy veterans. Well, there's one Coast Guard guy. But we talked about what we did when we were in the Navy. So I was in the Navy at the tail end of Vietnam, and I was a radar technician. And that gave me not just a background in RF, it gave me a background in electronics. And I was able to get out of the Navy and go to the university. Had I not done that, I don't know what I would have been doing. But you get the idea. So we satisfy the career section of the Radio Merit Badge requirement, where the volunteers on the USS Midway, the radio team, where they talked about what they did when they were in the Navy. And when they got out of the Navy, most of us end up doing something related to what our MOS happened to be our career, or how should I say, our specialty in the military. many of us went and worked in industry where we were applying what we learned in the military to what we made a living on thereafter. The scouters that would help you definitely need access to the kind of expertise that you see in the amateur radio clubs. All right. So there are a lot of resources that are available. So if you go to the JOTA section of scouting.org, you go to the K2BSA section, you're going to see a lot of leader guidelines, operator guidelines, planning calendars. Now is the time to start planning, about 6 months out from October. Okay. So we do 2 instances of Jamboree on the Air here in San Diego Imperial Council, where we're either at Camp Balboa or Camp Fiesta Island, and then up at the Matagway Scout Ranch, where we do Weeblos Woods. Okay. You can register your station, just like when you register for field day. And that way, when you can pre-arrange contacts with other scouting units, which is what we try to do. We try to, especially where we know that we are likely to make contact from San Diego. It's very easy to make contact with scouting units in Arizona, Utah, Oregon, Washington State. It's kind of the left coast. And then if band conditions are favorable, it's all over the United States. It's a lot of fun. And that's the other unwritten requirement is you got to make it fun. So that the transmitter hunting is super fun, and it works with both Cub Scouts as well as Boy Scouts and Scouts that are from 11 to 17. All right. Again, go to this site if you want all sorts like the sample calendar, the program ideas, success stories, and there's patches. The currency of scouting is patches. So for example, I have this patch. I have from every year that I've participated in Jamboree on the Air, there is a patch that's specific to that year. Okay. So I'm going to stop here. And Jim Wilson is the organizer for radio scouting. He was the organizer of our presence at the National Jamboree. So you can, if you live in an area of the country and you have questions, Jim knows everybody everywhere. If you are interested in kind of the Southern California experience, you can contact me at my call sign at arl.net. So I'll stop here and entertain any questions. So over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. You might down your stop your desk share if you're going to not have any more there.
Yeah, let me stop. All right.
Okay, are there any questions out there? Hands up or anything in the chat? That's a good presentation, sir.
Who put together the transmitter and receiver set from 1947? Oh, we have a question in the upper left corner. Go for it.
Hi, Kevin. Hey, I just learned about the International Spirit Award. Says you need to participate in Jamboree on the Air. Is that new?
No, it's required. It's one of the requirements in the citizenship in the world.
Uh-huh. I think K2BSA should put that like on their front page because I didn't know. Otherwise, I would have been having that on my flyer for JOTA for the past 5 years.
Yeah, I can't remember when I learned about it, but now we get scouts specific that will show up for JOTA specifically to get that requirement in when they're working on this. It's an Eagle required merit badge.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, super.
Cool. Okay.
There is one comment, I guess from Frank in Spokane, the amateur radio operator patch has been discontinued since 2020, but Mickey says if you need one, check out eBay. There are a couple of sellers that still have some left.
Yeah, I have heard that also. That's why and sometimes when you go into a scout shop, they will have a stash and you can get one. So I heard that they were going to be discontinued, so I bought all the ones that were available.
So you're the reason we don't have them anymore.
In the San Diego Scout Shop. But yes, I understand. I don't think there's anything preventing us from just making them ourselves. I'll look into that. I don't know why they were discontinued, but I will ask K2BSA about that. So the key thing is for those of you that are, I really appreciate there's so many folks that are on the Zoom session this evening. Please do look at the planning guides on the website and reach out to the next time if you haven't had your club meeting. Actually, the Palomar Amateur Radio Club meeting is going on right now. I'm a member of the Palomar Amateur Radio Club meeting. But now's the time to start planning and reach out to the scouting units in your area of the country. And then you know how to get in touch with me if you want to coordinate making contact in October. I'm happy to do that.
And if there's anybody that anybody thinks might be eligible for the knot, I believe there's 10 requirements, and you have to meet 7 of them. They're not that bad if you're an active scout leader, and contact your section manager to initiate the application. I've given out 3 of them. It's not that hard to get, and it's a very prestigious award because there's only about 18 of them that have ever been given out.
Wow. And you did 3. That's pretty good.
Well, that's excellent.
Okay, Dan, you got your microphone turned on there. I guess you're getting ready to ask a question.
No, I was just going to make a comment that my contact with Scouts ended, I think, when I was a Cub Scout in about 1958 or 59. And then I, this past October during Pacificon, I was actually trying to reach some of the Scouts on the air at Pacificon, and ended up to talking to some folks in Northwest Washington, the state of Washington, at a Jamboree on the Air.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that was kind of a pleasure. Some of the finest young men and women I've encountered were actually Eagle Scouts training with, some local law enforcement agencies. And they just gave me a lot of hope for the future. I'll just leave it like that.
Well, super. I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, the largest venturing group in San Diego Imperial County is the one that works with the sheriffs. So you typically so Ventures is a co-ed part of scouting, where you typically are. There used to be one called Explorers, but you kind of choose an area that you want to focus on. I'm trying to put together a venture crew. Before COVID happened, I was trying to put together a venture crew that focused on radio, our radio careers in radio, because of how much it's not just that radio is ubiquitous. We have a major Apple is moving into the former Hewlett Packard printer division here right down the street from where I live. They will be hiring a bunch of RF savvy people. We've got a number of companies that are in the area, including Viasat. And so what I've done is I've reached out to several of these companies where they would entertain having the scouts visit so that they could learn about careers at that particular, in a given company. So I've talked to Viasat, I've talked to General Atomic, the Navy, and the only, how should I say, the only disappointment that I've had this far is that many of these companies do not have very many women engineers. Qualcomm is another major company in the area. They have more women engineers, but the Viasat has a number of women engineers. But what we're trying to do is have the scouts earn their license. At the Palomar Amateur Radio Club, when a scout or a troop earns their, passes their technician exam, they come to the Palomar Amateur Radio Club meeting, do the flag ceremony, and we give them free radios. And now with the price points coming down for name brand radios, you don't have to give the scout a Bofang. There's some halfway decent Yaesus that are
Refreshing.
and icon. Yeah, you give them. Me personally, if they go through the program, and we've done this before, we've gone in and helped scout whole troops where they spend 20 minutes per meeting doing the ham study app on their phone or the ham study website. We tell them it's just like doing homework for 20 minutes. If they just pay attention for 20 minutes, take the practice tests until they're passing 70% or better. And our experience is after 6 weeks, the majority of the scouts can pass the technician exam if they do 20 minutes a day. It doesn't have to be 7 days a week, but if they do it, 4 to 5 days a week. We've had we did one troop, 474, the whole troop, the PLC, the Leadership Council said we're all going to do it, and the adults agreed. So all of these scouts and all of the unit leaders studied for the exam, and all but one scout passed the exam, and all but one adult leader passed the exam. Then they all got radios, and when they went out backpacking, they all had their radios. And they know, and here even in, how should I say, San Diego County does have areas like in the mountains where there's no cell phone coverage. But on the Pacific Crest Trail that goes from Mexico all the way up to Canada, there are large hunks of the Pacific Crest Trail where you can hit a repeater. There's no cell phone coverage, but you can hit a repeater. 2 meter 440 repeater. Anyway, I'll stop there. I've had a lot of fun talking to you guys this evening.
It's been very, very educational. Sometimes some of it's been refreshing to look back on. Are there any more hands up? No. Yes. No. Okay. How are we doing in chat there, Barry?
They're good in chat.
Okay.
Yeah, you got a upper left-hand corner has a Michael.
Yes, I have another question. When you did the radio, when they're walking around the ship describing what they see, were they on ham bands?
Say that again. Ask that question.
When you had them walk around the ship describing what they see on their radios, were they using ham bands or FRS radios or?
We can do both. We can do FRS or we can use the ham band. So we have HT. We're actually going to do a dress rehearsal this upcoming Saturday.
So it's okay if I give my scouts regular HTs for the ham band, even though they don't have their license?
You do third-party traffic. What we do is we have a radio room adult licensed operator with the scouts. So if we're using the ham bands in the clear, we say third-party traffic, and we use call sign. So if we're going to use ham bands, so the call sign of the USS Midway is NI6IW. So we do third-party traffic, and then hand the mic over to the scout that's next. It's typically the scenario is there's 4 scouts per group, and each group of 4 scouts goes to a given plane. It could be an F7, and the scout has to carry out the conversations, but net control. So if you got 3, you got it. Net control Alpha, net control Bravo, net control Charlie, and they speak to the scouts either by way of third-party traffic, but the conversation has to include alphanumerics. So the net control operator will ask them to describe any designation on the tail of the aircraft. They will be asked to, for example, they'll be, if they're next to an F7, they will be asked to say, you're next to a Foxtrot 7. And you get the idea. So, but to answer your question, if we're using amateur radio frequencies, it's third-party traffic. If we do have, we're going to test this a complete dress rehearsal this Saturday. This is a new program that we are developing on the USS Midway.
Okay.
When we get on HF, so there's there's D star, 20 meter, 40 meter, and CW on, we have Elecraft KXs, and then there's an ICOM that is doing the D star. And the second Saturday to put in another plug for the USS Midway, the second Saturday of every month is a special event that starts at 0800 Pacific and runs until 1600 Pacific. And it's to commemorate some event in U.S. Navy history. We make during the biggest one is Museum Ships Week. I think the last Museum Ships Week, we made 1,000 QSOs, over 1,000 QSOs between 20, 40, and CW. And this is advertised on the ARL website.
Well, that's cool. That is really neat.
And we get guys from all over. Many of them, because the QSO exchanges very often, we ask them if they were in the military. Sometimes we get guys that, many of them were in the Navy tail end of Vietnam, so they remember what it was like. And some of them have, parents or relatives. So we get a lot of stories about when they were in the Navy or when they were in the military, or their parents were in the military.
Hey,
So highly recommend it to get a chance to get on the air. Second Saturday of every month.
second Saturday of every month. That's cool.
Yeah, 20 and 40 voice and CW and D star.
Okay, when you're on D-Star, do you hang out on a particular reflector?
Yeah, it is advertised. That is, yes, they do. And I don't know the reflector off the top of my head, but it's published. You can go to the NI6IW, go to the USS Midway website, as well as the ARL website, and it's published.
Okay, good. Well, this has been a great presentation. Appreciate you doing it.
You bet.
If you don't mind, when you get done here, could you send me the slides you used tonight? I like to have them in PDF form if I can.
Yeah, I already submitted that to the folks that organized this. They asked me to send that in advance, and I did.
I thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay, let's try it one more time. Are there anybody out there? Any more questions, comments, answers, whatever? I don't see any. Barry, how you doing?
Everything is good.
Okay, with that, just about even on the hour. That's pretty good timing. I'm gonna
All right, far out.
and pull the plug here.
Thank you all for coming.
All right, you guys take her easy. All righty, out here.
Bye-bye.